David Morgan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, we're really excited to have you on. Tim Price.
Sadly, there's not much to discuss. There's very little going on at the moment.
Yes, there's hardly anything happening in the world. So, So, tell us about your journey into the financial markets. Now, I've seen you in a documentary. I think it was in 2012, I believe. But I'm guessing your career predates that by quite a long way.
Well, it does. So try to make this succinct. I was really fascinated by the markets as a young kid, and asked my dad to get me involved in the stock market at age 16, which is illegal. In the U.S., you have to be 18 or older to contract. But they had a loophole in California where they signed this document called the Uniform Gift to Minors Act, where if your parents signed it, you could start trading stocks. So I started trading stocks at age 16, and my dad asked me what I wanted to do for a living. Basically said I want to be on the financial markets, and he blew up. Said no way. He had a bad experience with a stockbroker, and so I kind of got veered off into an aircraft career. But the markets were always kind of my heart of hearts. So the whole time I was, working. I didn't do anything in college really, other than working on my degree. And I started, flying. Started flying at 16, came out with an aero engineering degree, went in the aircraft industry, but it still was, once I started working, I started, being in the market. So I kind of moonlighted while I was in the aircraft industry and lost that, left that aircraft industry and started full-time in finance. But the story behind the story is the whole time I was in that job, I was also had an insurance license, working with financial planners and that type of thing. So once I was on my own and started working directly with a financial planner, I pretty much discovered the game, and I didn't really like it. I thought it was too directed by the top dogs in the company to what to sell them, when to sell them, selling maybe a position that the company had that we wanted to get out of to our clients, that type of thing. So I left that one independent. In the meantime, I'd studied Austrian economics, went back to school after my aero degree and got a degree in finance, got a master's in finance. And once I broke free when the internet started, I just went independent, started my own landing page. That was basically for research for me. A couple of people found it. So what do you do? I said, I write a newsletter, which was my passion, what I really wanted to do, with no real pre-planned, I'm going to make this happen. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. A few people came on board, and a business built up organically from basically zero to hero at one point. I had a lot of subscribers at the top in 2011. Today we're about 1/3 as many as that, but I've had a very loyal following pretty much from the time I entered the web.
You mentioned Austrian economics. How did that happen? Because, Austrian economics is not well known, certainly here in the UK, or I dare say in Europe, ironically, but it seems to be much more favorably received in the States. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, what happened was, good ability to have critical thinking, which are really not taught, and just a curious, inquisitive mind. And I started looking at, the banking system and understanding it before I was ever, schooled in it or went for any formal education, just reading on my own. And I started to come across some of the writers in the early days, newsletter writers such as myself now, and talking about, how the economy really worked. And then someone along the line referred to the Austrian school. And I thought, what the hell is that? And of course, no computers, no iPhones, none of that. So I had to kind of just dig a little deeper, go to the library, start looking up stuff. And, I'd read None Dare Call Conspiracy by Gary Allen. You read that book, it'll mess up your mind for a while, especially if you're like an 8th grader. And just started digging in and saying, holy crap, man, this whole thing's built on a lie. They could print funny money out of nothing and make everybody accept it. You got to pay your taxes in it, and they've got a rigged game going here. And then I started looking in the Austrian school, and one of the primers, one of the best still written, in my opinion, is Murray Rothbard, What Has the Government Done to Our Money? And you read that little, book, but it's very, every word has got value. And holy moly, we have been persuaded into believing something that just isn't true. And all of these The system, I call it, the money masters, as I refer to them, have set up a system that they know is going to fail. All they really want is control, and they're going to maintain control basically at all costs. And that was, well, what can I as an individual do about it? What does I, as a financial newsletter writer, explain it, educate people, help people to at least opt out themselves or families, a corporation or whatever. And so my mission statement is to teach and empower people to understand the benefits of an honest financial system. And that cuts through everything: politics, religion, a lot of beliefs, because everybody's concerned with money because it represents security to the human. And without that security, we're kind of floating out there wondering, what's going to happen next, which is, as you kind of alluded to at the beginning, where we are now. Not much going on, eh, David? Yeah, not much.
There's a book that has been revelatory to me. I don't know if you're familiar with the book called 180 Degrees by
Fergus.
Fergus O'Connor Greenwood. Thanks, Paul. Are you familiar with this book?
I am not, but I'll look it up when we get done.
It's called 180 Degrees, Unlearn the Lies You've Been Taught to Believe. And I came across it by accident about 4 years ago or so. And I think it was probably shortly after the whole COVID thing erupted. And I came across it by accident, but it's, we've subsequently had the author, the pseudonymous author, Fergus O'Connor Greenwood on the podcast, but I don't know whether Paul, I don't know whether you've read it, Paul, but it for me, it's one of the most extraordinary and challenging and concerning and liberating things I've ever read, because its essential argument is, if you take it at face value, and it's meticulously researched, about 800 odd pages, and practically half of it is basically sources and notes and citations and stuff. So it's meticulously researched, but it's the essential argument is that we've been lied to basically forever about basically everything. So the fact that we have a rigged monetary system is only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and not to argue, but maybe a different take on the main topic. Tip of the iceberg in a way, but also it's at the top of the pyramid in my studied view, because money affects everyone. As I said, it transcends your nationality. People in India are just concerned about their money position as they are in the UK or in the US. But I agree. I think everything you could think of out there has probably been deceptive in one way, shape, or form.
But the funny thing, you mentioned India, and the funny thing about Asia and India and China in particular, is these guys have a recognition of the fact that paper isn't money. Gold and silver are money, and paper's just trash.
An innate understanding that it's BS. They all know it. Yeah, here in the West, what I like to call the Anglo-American Empire, UNS, and the financial leaders, powers, get us to believe that crap, and it's crazy. Like you say, you go to India, which I've never been to, by the way. I'm pretty world traveled, have not been in it. I missed that trip. But regardless, even in South American countries, if I tip somebody in silver at a hotel, they know damn well what they're getting. They don't question it. They cherish it. Thank you, senor. It's like, okay, we get it. But in the U.S., you tip somebody in silver at a restaurant, and you have to explain what it is and why it's value. And I just tried to pay for something on a little small car repair, and I was going to pay the guy in silver. It's independent. It's not like a corporation. So he had the option as an independent to take it or not take it. And I didn't pitch him real hard. I said, hey, you got, this real money, or you got this script by a private corporation called the Federal Reserve? Which one do you want? Oh, man, give me the greenbacks. I don't get silver. I don't understand it. I don't want it. I don't need it. So there we are.
It occurred to me actually the other day before you came on the podcast, and I'm really pleased that you've come on at a time when I was thinking very deeply about this, that perhaps I should think about money in the same way as energy. Like, it's energy. You give money to somebody to make them do something. It has a certain amount of energy, and it's just a record of that transaction, rather than thinking about it as something that has value, is supposed to have value itself. That was the separation that occurred to me. When you think about it as a piece of paper on its own, it's not backed by anything. So clearly it can't have any value. But could it have value because are agreeing between us that if I give you a certain amount of money, you will then do something or give me a good or give me something that is worth something, a commodity or something like that. Now, that simplification, I understand, brings in the government printing that money and devaluing that money over time, which is a kind of separate issue to it, really, but an important one and one that matters to long-term wealth. But in a system, can we differentiate that? Have I got that totally wrong?
No, I think you make a good point. This is where I would come and veer off from strict Austrian. But really what we're talking about is labor. So what we're talking about is, how do you account for my labor? And that's energy. If it's, brain power, you could call it intellectual labor, or if it's a manual labor to dig a ditch, and a lot of are kind of both, right? I mean, and so that's the basis of an economy. What do I do in the real world that produces something that is of value to someone else or to myself? I mean, I can build my own log cabin with my own labor. I've made wealth. So the argument really is between what's called a legal construct or specie money being what humans have adapted as the ultimate form, which is gold and silver, or gold, silver, and copper throughout the ages. So on one side, you've got specie money. On the other side, you've got a intellectual construct. I think they both could work. You go back to the tally sticks, which you guys invented in the UK, and that was basically a system that worked quite well. So I just by experience, I'm pretty practical. Being a degreed engineer, you're taught to think logically. I mean, you can't design an airplane and come up with great ideas. I mean, every nut bolt, everything's got to be exact. It's got to perform correctly. It's got to have the right tensile strength. I don't want to go down the hole too far, but you get my point. So I'm a pretty clear thinker, and either one can work. The problem with the fiat system, where it's a construct, is that man's nature is somehow or other to edge out a little bit more profit or cheat or cut a corner or skip a part of the process or whatever. And it's not all of the, everyone. In fact, it's probably the minority, but it doesn't take more than that one bad apple to spoil the whole container once it infests into the system. But I don't disagree with that. I think that's the way. And in fact, my documentary, Silver Sunrise, which is for free and available at silversunrise.tv, talks a lot about energy, because energy is really the basis of everything, or our labor, our energy. And so how do we, make a better system? And really the answer to that is free energy. I mean, if there is such a thing, there doesn't have to be, but if we had a construct, if we had a construct where we had much better energy system globally, where let's say we could pull energy out of the ether, or even nuclear, where it was better formatted than it is now with small modular reactors, what have you. It would have a whole different world. I mean, it's really access to energy that allows you to produce something, and that's where the oil cartel comes into the big picture. But no, I'm on that page. In fact, if you want to go one step further, I'll give it back to you, is in the Great Depression, and even now with some of the cryptos, but people will design their own communities and hand out receipts. My labor as a baker is not as valuable as a skilled carpenter that can build, a desk. I mean, and everyone agrees to that. In other words, they make up their own paper format. One is Ithaca, New York. I think it was New York. You look up the Ithaca dollar. They had their own system. It worked fine. So you can have a construct that the community agrees upon. It's just when it's forced upon you, and it's a government at charge with force and says, we force you to use this. We can print as much as we want, and we can tell you what it's worth, because they can put on price controls and that type of thing at the end, which they will do. Then we're under duress. But as far as it's a free market determining the value amongst each other, and let's say the Ithaca dollars example, I don't want to drone on too far, but a carpenter really isn't worth that, and so you can renegotiate that type of thing. I mean, the value of money can vary. I mean, when you are on the system, When you looked at silver as the primary source of commerce worldwide, and you look at the Spanish Empire, and when they made these huge discoveries in South America and brought all the silver back, it depreciated the currency. Why? Because there's more of it, just like when you print more dollars. So there's no perfect system in my view, but I think there could be an honest system. And as long as it's honest and the system has the opportunity to fluctuate with the change in the economy, the change with productive capacity, the change with intellectual development, that type of thing, you should have a really good system. Good, not perfect.
What I find staggering about the industry in which we all operate is that people and institutions have developed quite sophisticated ways of assessing value in markets, equities, bonds, derivatives, whatever. But I would say there's a crushing lack of awareness as to the fundamental nature of what money actually is amongst pretty much every practitioner. So, with the possible exception of people who say, like yourself and myself, would have an awareness of the Austrian school, so-called Austrian school. The fact that, as you've already alluded, in a free market, the free market favors gold or silver because their use has always arisen voluntarily and spontaneously because they're the best form of money. And the fact is, we don't use them as money. We have to use fiat because the government insists that we do on pain of force with military backing and legal backing behind it. That for me is a stunning lack of awareness about the practitioners of the industry by those same people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you said it quite succinctly. I made some notes. I think I'm going to read them just because they're pretty succinct. So I just want to be very direct. Every one of these topics ties back to one single root issue, and that's control. Freedom is the first casualty of a rigged monetary system, a system that's not just an economic tool, it is a control mechanism. When it's forced on you, when the money is sound, meaning it holds value outside of the centralized control, people are free. They can store their labor, transact privately, and plan for their future. But when money is manipulated through endless currency creation and suppressed interest rates, the opaque policy by the money powers, freedom erodes. You don't lose it overnight. You lose it through inflation, through taxation, by stealth, and through dependency on, let's say, some of the working class. I mean, in America, you can be working class and still get food stamps. Because I don't know what it's like in the UK, but you call it on the dole. But here you could actually work at a minimum wage job, and it's such a low wage rate that you still qualify to get subsidized by the state. I'm not a socialist by a long shot, but what I am saying is it's rather pathetic that in a free market, if they were, in a real true free market, everybody should have a much higher standard of living.
But that's exactly the point. I remember we discussed this on a recent podcast, and there was, I think it was a New Yorker magazine. It was a comparison between two front covers of a New Yorker at around Christmas. And one's from like the 50s and the other is from the last few years. And the one from like the 50s has an image of a painting of a family, and you've got the classic nuclear family. You've got a father and a mother and a couple of kids, and they're fondly looking at their home, and that could basically have been purchased with the output of one breadwinner rather than both parents having to work, and life was good. And that's, say, 50, 60, whatever years ago. And then you look at the sort of the Christmas cover of more recent times, and it's basically a single person of dubious ethnicity. It's not entirely clear, and she it is in basically a hovel with crap all over the floor and basically living off her computer screen. It's like it was possible to raise a family on one income not so long ago, and now it's impossible almost for a two-parent family to generate enough to own a property and raise kids. Something's gone very badly wrong with the money.
Well, absolutely. No, you said it well, and it's pretty pervasive. It's the same here in the States. I mean, I have two millennials. My oldest daughter is a single mom. Not a single mom. She's married, and I have one granddaughter. And they both worked for, right out of college for a number of years. She actually was able to stop working and raise their daughter, which is very unusual in this day and age. But we live in a city that's pretty low cost relative to a lot of other places in the States. My other daughter married, no kids yet, and they both work to be able to make the mortgage. There's just no doubt about it. They couldn't do it with just one working.
So, do you advocate buying silver over gold, both, and or just accumulating assets that are not fiat, basically? As soon as you effectively get fiat, one should get out of it. Would that be a fair assessment?
It is. I mean, what I try to teach is, and as difficult as this is, because here's what we're discussing right at this moment, and that's live within your means. And can you? I mean, people are, both are working and you're just struggling. Can you save anything? So one is to try to the best of your ability, live within your means. And then if you do have the opportunity to save, I do advocate saving in real money, not saving in the system, because over the long term, usually 5 to 10 years or longer, you are going to have preservation of wealth. So that labor, that hour of labor that you saved and you were being paid $7 an hour. Well, let's take my situation and make it holistic. So when I started the website, I was charging $60 a year, but I really wasn't charging $60 a year. My thought was I would charge 1 ounce of silver per month. And at that time, silver was $5 the ounce, which you can do the math in your head. 12 times 5 is 60. Well, right now, that $5 piece of silver from 25 years ago is now worth roughly $80. So that's up substantially, yet it's the same ounce. Nothing changed as far as that ounce. What changed is the amount of fiat printed against it. And silver has maintained more than its value relative to what it was 25 years ago. So, yes, silver over gold only because it's more affordable. I mean, if you want, gold is more mainstream. It's more an established monetary asset. The banks covet it, so it's in the system, so to speak, more so than silver by a long shot. And if you could save in fractionals like 1/10 silver coins, or there are other alternatives like gold backs, which are 1/1000th of an ounce, so they're roughly $5 per gold back in gold melt value. But both is best, but silver is more affordable. So yeah, the point is you don't want to store your labor in the system. You don't want to put it in, pound sterling, US dollars, Aussie dollars, or pesos. You want to put it into real money.
Do you get the sense that people are at a global level are waking up to this fraud?
Yes, more and more all the time. I mean, I get, not to get too emotional. I try to keep, not that we don't have them, and I've been better about, admitting I have them, but to try and to stay out of that side, I do get touched from time to time that people that push back very hard come around later and say, wow, you know what? I figured it out. You're right. Not about me being right. The principles are what's right. I'm just a messenger, one among many. But there's a guy in the UK that pushed back pretty hard. I won't give his name because he's very well known now. But one of my first trips to the UK, I just gave my speech, and he was curious. So you could tell he wasn't like, you're wrong. It was more of a, well, this does this does that. And he's in the system, and he's, in my opinion, more or less been brainwashed by the system, because it's like this. It's always been like this. It's like this for my parents. And what you're telling me doesn't make a lot of sense. And I just started, presenting the case. And he is one of the biggest advocates for, free market, independent thinking, and honest money. So, that alone, just one person makes you happy. But even when there's more and more, and then you see, groups like I'm in the Citizens for Sound Money group, and, it's small, it's not real powerful, but the idea is very powerful because everyone wants their freedom. No one wants to be subservient to the state. And yet, in a way, we all are. are, even if we don't realize it. And as you said, I'll just finish with this. That's what the big wake-up call is, and more people are seeing it now.
What do you think is the thing that people most fundamentally kind of misunderstand about money and how it works?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that it's stored labor, that when you save money, you're saving your labor for future, purchase or for retirement, or, if you're wealthy, to create be a benefactor, create a new library or create a new whatever for the community. So there's all kinds of things you can do with it, because money's basically stored labor and a tool that can be used in many, many different ways. But I don't think that they realize that when they're storing their labor today, is it going to have the same value in 10, 20, 30, or 40 years from now? And most people don't, because they keep getting paid more and they get an inflation adjustment and they get a raise and they get the idea that, that's the system and it works and it's supposed to work that way. Without ever considering the fact that even though the number is bigger, the value continues down at a greater rate than the increase in numbers. In other words, they're getting paid more, but they're able to obtain less over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So by the time they get to retirement, they're looking at, holy shit, I saved this much. It looks like a big number when I started the workforce. In fact, it's a bigger number than I thought I would have achieved beginning the workforce, but it really just is allowing me to subsist. Whereas if they started saving in silver and gold from the time they entered the workforce and 30 or 40 years goes by, they're going to say, holy moly, I can have a very nice, comfortable standard of living. It's just the fact that the lie is that you can print wealth. You can't. It has to be earned.
Do you think part of the problem is that there's effectively just too much trust in government? That people
way too much trust. Sorry if I interrupted, but you hit a hot button. Honestly, we've been trained, we've been brainwashed. I think about my early days in school, and I was a bit of a rebel. I've always been kind of a outside the box, just by nature. But even with that kind of a rebellious attitude, I've taught, you can always trust a policeman. You can always ask a fireman for directions. Trust authority, trust authority, trust authority. And what I teach, any young person or adult, doesn't matter, is question authority, question authority, question authority. The founding, as you guys know, even though you're from the UK, the principle was we own all our rights. It's God-given or higher power, however you want to think of it. And our God-given rights were secured by the Constitution. We ceded all power to the government, very limited amount, to protect our given rights. That's what the government was created for, is to protect us from someone, in the system or in the new paradigm, the United States Constitution, that the government would protect our God-given rights. That's what it was there for. It wasn't there for anything else. And now, of course, it's so convoluted. We all know that on both sides of the pond and everywhere else. But the idea was that we had all power. And that was the first time in history, at least recorded history that we know of, where we actually had that kind of power to the individual. But of course, it's very upside down now.
So how do you see this playing out? Because the nature of the game, I would suggest at the moment, is that you've got a growing groundswell of people who are waking up to if you like, this long con everywhere, not just in the UK, not just in the US, but around the world. There's a growing groundswell of not just unease, but active hatred and contempt for the quite visible now corruption in government and in politics. I've described this as we seem to be basically on both sides of the pond at the looting of the treasury stage of sort of the end of empire. People are, everybody's hair is on fire. Everybody knows that there's something going wrong, badly wrong. I think it's increasingly obvious to everybody, or to a growing number of people, what the problem is. I don't think you can keep a lid on this for that much longer.
I am going to answer your question. It's at the end of my notes because you did a great job, Tim. So, I talk about CBDCs for a while, and that's
which is clearly control again.
Yeah. Yeah, they are marked as an innovation. They are not. They are a sophisticated financial surveillance system. In fact, the most sophisticated one ever conceived. It's programmable money, which means they control what you spend. They control what you spend on. It could be restricted, in other words.
They can turn it off.
Yeah. So it's not a currency. It's a policy enforcement embedded in the code. What comes after, which is your question, and that's hopefully a bifurcated system. So on one track, you have fully digitized, fully monitored, fully controlled system. But on the other hand, you have a parallel system, physical metals, barter networks, decentralized exchanges. So history has shown in the past clearly whenever control tightens, parallel systems emerge. So I am just optimistic and idealistic enough to think about how I will conduct business, if it's required to have the real ID/CBDC, and what we can do about it. So I do think there will be enough of resistance that hopefully there'll be enough of resistance immediately where the authorities have to back off and come up with another. I doubt that will be the case because they have so much power with propaganda, the propaganda press, the mainstream media, and people are taught to idolize. I mean, idolize sports figures, idolize celebrities, even idolize some politicians, and, you get some of those idols up there, those icons, and they say, oh, this is great, and you're going to get this, and you're going to get that, and you're not going to have to work as much, and you're going to get better food, and blah, 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 blah. Who knows what kind of propaganda they'll throw at us. And there'll be the herd. The herd will say, oh, give me it. I need it. I want it. But there'll be people, as you said, that will say, no, it's another scam. It's another propaganda push. We don't want it. We want freedom. We want to make our own decisions. So that, I think, is what you're going to see. Now, in the States, there's certain states within the union that have reiterated we can transact amongst ourselves freely as long as both sides agree in precious metals. So in some states, you can do that. It's not done much now because we still are so used to the fiat system and a plastic card and a card reader and all that stuff. But when things start to fall apart, I don't think it'll take very long for the people in the know to start using, actual coins or receipts. I mean, I could write a receipt because I trust you. I say, Tim, I trust you. You don't have the silver now, but I know you'll get it to me, and you can, here's a receipt. We can transact amongst ourselves just fine. And is it perfect? No, but I said earlier, it's the best system that's ever been thought of because it's free on both sides. We act in both of our self-interest. I get this much silver and think I'm getting a better deal, and you're getting a product and you think it's worth that much silver. So you're a winner and I'm a winner and we're both happy.
So the thing with money, and as soon as money, paper money or any other type of money comes into existence, there will be bad actors who will try to forge that money. So in the old days with gold coins, they had those kind of marks around the side because people would just shave a little bit off and keep shaving them off in order to kind of make enough to make another coin. And so that was one form of fraud, or getting copper or another base metal of some kind and then covering it in gold and then palming it off as another coin, which causes a problem. I'm going to premise what I'm about to say because I like to think of arguments, whether I agree with them or not. I'd like to pose even things that I agree with. I'd still like to ask the argument on the other side. With CBDCs and with Bitcoin that we could perhaps come on to, one of the problems that governments face is that the current cash that we have in society can be and is fraudulently printed by bad actors. Sometimes bad countries do it, potentially. And it's a constant arms race of increasing technology. If you've ever looked over some of the older notes and how simple they are compared to the technology that we've got now, and some of the fraudulent £20 notes that are going around are amazingly good copies of the real thing. And I think it must be worse in America because all your notes are exactly the same. And it's very easy. They're all the same size. And there's an effect on money that I find really fascinating that I'm going to mention after we've got your answer to this question. CBDCs, I think, will be brought in when there's a crisis, because that's the perfect time. You give people no option, which is basically your bank account will be converted into CBDCs or it goes to zero, or some form of effect. But the fact that any form of money that's in circulation is subject to bad actors trying to print it effectively or create their own fraudulently, and governments have to deal with that. Is that not one argument for why we should create or have some form of electronic money? If we could trust the government, I know we can't, but if we were able to trust the government, wouldn't that be a good system? And by implication, isn't that where Bitcoin comes in, because it has a trustless system?
All right, well, you asked a couple questions. Well, one is, even in a quote unquote perfect system where it's electronically based, you could still probably game the system at some level. I mean, you could put in a back door, or you might put in, I forget the movie, but it was years ago, and it was, I think, Eddie Murphy, and he had like he was taking a fraction of a penny, like 0.0001 cent. That was a rounding error for financial institutions. But that rounding error multiplied by billions of transactions a day made your bank account grow quite steadily. So there could be something like that. But I get your point. I would think that there is no such thing as a perfect system. Would an electronic system be superior to the other one? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. The market would tell us. I'm a big believer the market knows more than all of us. And I think if there was someone cheating a gold back, for example, which is exactly 1/1000th of a ounce of gold, or a fraction thereof, so 2/1000ths, 3/1000ths, 5/1000ths, that type of thing, because they're different denominations. If usually the market finds the fraud, and the fraud is exposed, and that company is out of business, or that individual is, put before the townspeople and put in a cage for a while, or whatever. But more importantly, you asked me about Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is something that I've really become quite fascinated with, as far as how far it's gone the opposite direction. I wrote a piece about 2016. It might have been 2014. You can look it up. It's out there somewhere on the web, called My 2 Bits About Bitcoin. And what I said in that article was that if it gains enough traction where it becomes a viable situation for monetary purposes, the government will come in, or someone will come in. And that's exactly what's happened. So if you look at the white paper versus where we are now, it's basically upside down from where it started. It's not a peer-to-peer payment system. It's not anonymous. It's been usurped by the banks. They've created ETFs so they could short the hell out of it. So when it goes down, they can profit from it, whereas most individuals that own it cannot. And the worst thing is, being a finance major, is what is it really worth? And it's worth whatever it costs to produce. And right now it costs, in almost all the major miners, about $100,000 to produce, but today it's at $72,000. So if I was in the gold mining business, which is one of my specialties, because most of the Morgan Report is reporting on the equity side of the resource sector. So if it's a copper company, or a rare earth company, or a cobalt company, or a gold company, and they're all mining these elements, I have to determine what is their margin. How much does it cost them to get that out of the ground and refine it? And how much is the market paying for it? And what's the differential? And it better be a profit. And the more profitable, more sustainable, better run, higher quality, whatever, is the best superior business. So that's what I do to analyze these companies. In the case of Bitcoin, if you're looking at Riot or Marathon or some of these big producers, it costs them $100,000 to produce a Bitcoin, and you're getting 72,000. They are basically going out of business. How do they maintain their business? Well, they maintain it by issuing shares, which is just like fiat printing from the government. So they're issuing more pieces of paper to keep the scam going. And of course, the people at the top that issue more shares give it to the top CEO and VP and their chief financial officer. So they water the milk and pretend everything's fine. But all I have to do is look at their stock performance to see how bad they are. So Bitcoin is on a destiny to unravel at some point. When, I don't know. The problem with Bitcoin is the authorities have taken it over. And what they're going to do is use it as a need through the stablecoin system, which is sort of a pseudo CBDC without the negative CBDC label. And the smart coin is used to produce more or back more any cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin, let's face it, and Ether are the two main ones. And they do that by buying what? Well, something stable called US Treasuries. Well, the US Treasury market isn't stable. It's a guaranteed return of nothing. I mean, it's a return on something created out of nothing. And the principal is X amount when you buy it and you get interest on it. But we're guaranteed that you're going to have that value confiscated over time. In other words, when the bond matures, be it a note of 10 years, 5 years, a bill of 6 months, or a bond of 30 years, doesn't matter. What you get at the end is not the same stored labor that it was when you bought it. So we're in a situation where now the government has found another sucker to buy a failing system called the US Treasury market and put it into the stable coin, which is an anathema to the truth. It's not stable at all, and produce another need or another big sinkhole for this fiat money system to continue.
I don't know if you've been following this. There's two specific guys on, or entities on Substack. One is a guy called Sayer G, and I don't know if you use Substack, but Sayer G is one, and it's someone, the pseudonymous author Escape Key is another, and they've both done really good work on delving into the Epstein files and what we can currently assess from the Epstein files, given that firstly half of them haven't been released at all, and those that have been released have been heavily redacted. What I found extraordinary is that there's clearly a huge, which has been all the media interest, a huge focus on sexual perversion and child trafficking and all this kind of stuff, which is, I think, it's just the tip of the iceberg. But what's really fascinating from what these two guys have unearthed is Epstein was way ahead of just about everybody in preparations for CBDC, for preparations for a putative pandemic, and therefore vaccine remedies and so forth. And we're going back 10, 20, 30 years. And he was basically front-running entities, including the World Economic Forum, to get into digital currency and digital money and all the rest. It's utterly fascinating, and you think, and I have no reason to challenge what these guys have done. It's all out there. It's all public domain now, courtesy of the Department of Justice. But it's like, if this one guy was capable of pulling all these threads together in a sort of control freak, wet dream, how many other Epsteins are running around out there?
Well, exactly. I have a couple comments. One is I did a series called Crypto Conspiracy. I don't know how old it is now, probably 3 or 4 years old. And it's 30 podcasts, and it's for free. It's on my blog. If you go to themorganreport.com and you go to the blog tab, I don't know what I've got on there, 2,000 entries. So you've got to use the search engine. So you're on the blog, you go to the search engine in the upper right, type in Crypto Conspiracies. It'll show you all 30 of those podcasts. If you go to 1, 2, 3, and 4, I point out in those first 4 the Epstein ties to Bitcoin, and also MIT, and also Bill Gates, and some of these characters that, again, these icons.
Well, the two names, sorry to cut in, the two names that leapt out for me were firstly the Rothschild family, Rothschild Group, and secondly JP Morgan. And the revelations that have come out in relation to Epstein through these guys like Escape Key and Sayer G. JP Morgan comes across as the house bank for Epstein. And well, I didn't quite see that coming. So I think they paid something like inconsequential fines of something like 3, 4, whatever $1 million while he was alive, and then well over $1 billion after he'd already died or allegedly died.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but it's insane.
But it's black comedy. You have to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, so, I was on that one as well. I called it a conspiracy so no one could say, hey, that's a conspiracy. No, I call it conspiracy right up front, get around that BS. But yeah, there's a lot of ties. My main thesis on that was that a lot of money that would have gone into honest money, gold and silver, were diverted going into Bitcoin. And I took a look, and really on the gold market, it would have an effect because all markets move at the margin. But on silver, the amount of money that went into Bitcoin, not that all of it would go to silver, it'd go to gold and silver. So you'd have to kind of proportion it correctly. But regardless, Bitcoin's a big market relative to silver. It's not that big a market relative to gold. So certainly, I think it's taken a lot. In fact, I'll give you one real quick example. I'll give it back to you. But I was involved with a good guy in the UK. It was Gold and Silver for Life was his main website. When I affiliated with him, did a lot of lectures in London and had a pretty good base of people that were in our group. And we did a couple podcasts about Bitcoin, and neutral and negative. Look, I'm free market. You want to blow your mind out on Bitcoin, you're a Bitcoin maximalist, so be it. I'm not going to run your life for you. If that's your true belief, I'm not going to interfere. But as far as me personally, no, I'm not involved. I don't like it. So anyway, we did those podcasts. Well, we broke apart, and he stopped that website, Gold and Silver for Life. He became a Bitcoin maximalist. He told all his people to sell all their gold and silver, all their mining shares, and he was really good at tracking the S&P 500. He did a good job, but he basically said, "Now sell everything and put it all into Bitcoin." And
it sounds like millenarianism.
Yeah, so it was very interesting, and I don't have any hard feelings. I mean, I let people be themselves, but he said himself, "I'm Bitcoin baptized. That's it. There's nothing better than Bitcoin." Wow. And I wonder what he thinks now. I don't know if some people, when you get a belief, I'm going to get philosophical for a minute, and you can bring me back on the tracks. But to me, having studied all the markets, which means you're actually studying psychology of the markets as well, is the biggest flaw in the human species is that a belief system can overrule the truth. You can believe something hard enough that all facts will persuade you to take a different track, but nonetheless, your belief is so strong it'll overrule facts right in front of you. It's called delusion. And you'll have that in the markets and in other areas of life. But it's really sad that we can't be principled enough to know what's true and what's false. And when we get the right, correct information, and some people can't, they will change their mind. So I
guess the problem is that if we were all Vulcans, life would be very, very boring.
Yes, probably. You make a good point.
But with regard to that delusion, some people are deluded and think that they can create something that can never be created before, and they're called crazy, and they end up being able to do it. And it's that element of human psychology to say, we're in this tribe here in this land in Africa, and there might be something over there. Should we risk our lives and go and have a look because we believe there could be something there? And in some ways it can short circuit things and cause problems, but some things en masse, it can create amazing things that people would never believe possible.
I agree, Paul. I think there's times that the majesty, the magic of life, if you will, is based on that idea that what if, and that it's very important to the human experience. I think the point I'm trying to make is that if that overrides new information and you are in the delusional camp, then maybe, that's sad. I think that part. But no, I think that awareness, that childlike attitude, I'll digress for a moment and you guys can bring me back. But when I was leaving the aircraft industry, there was an opportunity for me to take on a guy's business, and being a degreed engineer and pretty good at what I did. He really liked me. He really wanted me to take it up. This guy was genius level engineer. This guy was beyond maybe, I don't know, my capability. But anyway, but what I admired about him was how he approached everything was like a 6-year-old kid. I mean, that guy started with a blank piece of paper. I know nothing today, and went from zero all the way up through, math equations, whatever. I don't want to be too involved here. But it was like, God, this guy has got a different approach to the way he looks at life, which was so refreshing, compared to all these beliefs that we hold on to most of our lives and add on to them. And then we get in these echo chambers, which the algorithms are perfect at. I mean, the algorithms I get sent on most of the stuff I look at is feeding what I already believe. And that's why I make a concerted effort to make sure I look at the exact opposite almost daily to make sure that I'm not just being fed my own convictions. I mean, the late great Ayn Rand, check your premises. So again, if you find out you've been deluded into believing that, fiat is fine and you discover it's always failed, then maybe that paradigm shift, as one of you said a while back, the light bulb goes on. Say, yeah, we got to resist this. This is not working for me, my neighbors, my family, or anyone else.
What I find stunning is that anyone that was sort of paying attention during the 20th century would have realized that the most technocratic, most top-down, statist-controlled entities, namely the likes of the USSR, China, and so forth, were catastrophic failures of command and control. And not just that, but resulted in millions of deaths. And you would have thought that the idea of statist, top-down, centralist control would have been discredited by that. And yet everyone accepts central banking as if it's, like the best thing since sliced bread. What I find stunning that things that were thoroughly discredited in the last century, no one joins the dots to see how they ought to be equally discredited in this one.
Well, as Santayana said, the greatest lesson of history is that people do not learn the lessons of history. I mean,
but it may also, it may be worse than that. The government has no incentive to tell people what the history is, so we don't even get told the history.
Right.
Well, that goes back to you've got to do your own research. And what I find fascinating about people, that we have on the podcast that I love listening to, and your stories very, it kind of reflects that, David, in the sense that you did all the research yourself. You learned yourself. You obviously went through a schooling system of some kind, but we all know that that's not how you learn about life. We all know that's not how you learn about anything that's important. You learn about a subject doing it yourself, unpicking it, looking at what's been said, what's the truth, and spending time and research and working out the veracity of what you've been taught and whether it's right, because there's always a perspective. And it seems that our schooling system, for one reason or another, and we can get into those reasons potentially, is designed specifically not to educate us, to make us more reliant on the state, make us feel as though we can't do things for ourselves. And it goes back to this element of control. And just because you can exist in a system and you can be successful, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily as successful as you could have been had you taken control yourself.
Well, exactly. It is a control mechanism. It's programming. I mean, we're programmed through the state-run educational system. We're programmed through the boob tube, the TV. And very few people even stop to question it at all. It is accepted. Well, it's been that way for my parents, my grandparents, and it's like that for me. And that's it. I mean, going back to an earlier question about, maybe questioning some of society's mechanisms, but not the banking system. And I remember bringing one of my friends toward, the truth about banking. We're good friends, and telling them how it really worked. And I went at a very kind of a cursory primer type of introduction on fractional reserve banking. And his response to me was, well, somebody has to be the banker. In other words, he couldn't imagine a system that wasn't run by some type of institution that, you could store your labor, your money, and and withdraw later and all that. But yet, you know, you go back to the tally sticks, which was a fair system or whatever. The point being is that we take for granted some of these institutions and believe that we couldn't have anything different. And yet the idea is, of course, we can. We can create our own realities. I know that sounds a bit of new agey, but in a way, it is true. I mean, think about how the world really works. I mean, the idea of being able to, you know, fly an airplane, you know, was somebody's thought. You know, that idea was somebody's. I mean, the Wright brothers were the ones that are given the credit for it. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. That's not the point. The point is, all this stuff starts on our imagination. It's, you know, intellectual energy, if you will. You know, how to make an automobile, how to build the wheel, how to make a plow, all that stuff. Anyway, I don't go down the rabbit hole too far, but I think we're just put in a box from birth almost. I mean, that childlike behavior I was talking about, that guy that was genius level engineer, in my opinion, always maintain that freshness. And I think we all humans have that probably up till age 6 or thereabouts. And of course, depending on our society, whether it's UK or Anglo-American, I think on both sides of the pond, we're pretty much integrated into the school system at about the same age. But maybe in other places, more perhaps in India, I don't know, but other societies, you might get up to, you know, maybe age 8, 9, 10 before you're just kind of, you know, accepting that this is the way it is and it's supposed to be this way. I mean, you could say this is the way it is, but it's not supposed to be this way. And very little is put out from the state to the individual that, hey, what do you want to do in the world? You know, what kind of job do you want? What do you want to bring that's new? What's your purpose here? What kind of business do you want to start? Those type of questions, which of course a lot of the homeschoolers bring up those ideas to their kids. And the pendulum does swing both ways. I've studied enough monetary history, which means a subset of history itself, to realize that it goes one direction for a very long time, and then it fails, and then it comes back the other direction. And it usually hits extremes at some point in time, and then it comes back more toward the other direction. But so far, we are, I think, at an extreme where the controllers want even more control, and maybe that will be the breaking point.
Your reference to the guy that says, well, someone needs to be the banker reminds me of a guy, we're going back about 20 years now, certainly 15 years, and he was a motivational speaker, and he gave an excellent presentation about basically sort of self identity and people standing up for themselves. And at one point, he refers to people as basically playing the victim card, and he literally takes out a T-shirt with the word "victim" on it to sort of make a point that so many people go through life as effectively self-declared victims. And he mentioned he gave this presentation, he gave this talk or speech to a group, and then the first person from the audience came up to him and said, there was a lady that said, I saw the victim T-shirt. Can I buy some of those off you? And it's like, way to miss the point by a country mile.
Yeah, exactly. No, we're taught that too. You know, it's not your fault, and you know, a lot of cases it is. I mean, there are victims. It does happen, but it's not nearly as often as people are taught. I mean, they're taught to trust authority. I'm not good enough. You know, I call it the big daddy syndrome. You know, because when you're a child, you depend on your parents, or if you had, you know, or foster home or whatever, but you're depending on a parent authority of some type. And you need to. I mean, you are not self-sufficient when you're born, and through age 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, by the time you hit 11, 12, you might be able to do it.
And then you grow up.
Yeah.
But then some
you
of us
don't need a big daddy anymore because you become an adult. But very few in our society are adults. They're still big daddy. So even though they're an adult in age, it has little to do with the fact that this politician is my big daddy, and my big daddy's going to take care of these problems because I'm a victim and the system isn't treating me fair. But as soon as I get the right political class in there with the right head of the political party, then everything will change and be better. And it's just a ruse because the political class is a parasitical class. They're a parasite on the system now. There's no statesman left, really. I mean, you might be able to point out a few and take up your hand and have three fingers left, but you're not going to see real change. You can't. It's a defined system. I call it, the left wing and the right wing attached to the same bird, flying the same direction.
Well, it's the Uniparty.
The Uniparty. It is. It's a left wing, right wing. It's on the same bird, flying in one direction, getting what the bankers want, and maybe what changes is speed. You might see it slow down a little while. Oh, see, we're winning. Yay, our team. Very, very sad that there aren't enough adults in the world to really take responsibility. I mean, the problem is it's easy to be a victim because then you have somebody to blame. If you've got to be an adult and start blaming yourself for making poor decisions or not having the gumption to stand up and question authority. So wait a minute, that's not right. What, you're arrested for what? What's the crime here? Of course, it's fear, it's control, and they run by fear. I mean, you can go really deep. I don't know if I want to go there, but, how the energy system works in the universe, I don't really know. But what I do know is people like David Icke and others have talked about how this fear control mechanism actually feeds these evil entities, if you will. That's in the woo-woo class, and I don't think we really want to go there. But the point I'm making is that free, independent abilities are an illusion. We really don't have much freedom, even though you think you do. And of course, you'll get people that are not, let's say, as intellectually sound. I don't feel like I'm superior to anyone, but the point is that they think differently. And it's like, well, I can choose the red or green dress. I mean, of course I have free will. Of course I have a choice. Well, choosing what color dress you're going to put on is not much of a choice.
When we were mentioning the kind of misconceptions, and you mentioned the banking system, one of the fractional reserve banking system, one of the big misconceptions people have about banking is that the banks actually lend money based upon the money that they have, that they've been given as savings, which is completely wrong. The banks actually make money out of thin air. And if more people kind of understood that that's what they were doing, they literally have a license to create money out of thin air. That's what happens when you go to take a loan out. It's got nothing to do with what they've got in the bank deposited. That's the power that they have. It's a huge power.
A license to print money, you might say.
Exactly.
It's legal. And we wrote about it in the Silver Manifesto. We talked about, theoretically being on a, sound money system. And part of it is not being able to create something for nothing. Often when I'm interviewed, usually for the first time, people ask, the big question. And I say, well, we try to teach our kids that, you can't get something for nothing. You've got to work, you've got to study, you've got to do something. And yet the whole system is based on getting something for nothing. These bankers can create, money, quote unquote, money, currency out of thin air, out of basically nothing, putting digits on a computer. And once people understand that, I think it wakes up most of the people, I guess 80%, the other 20% or so asleep. It doesn't even resonate with them. And then there are pushbacks. I mean, I know of some cases that are here in the States where people have gone to court and protested that this is not legal. I am the house is the collateral for the loan and my labor's there to back it. But yet it was created from nothing. That isn't fair. It's immoral. And these cases haven't gone too far. There's been claims, where they won or whatever, which, you can pretty much figure out they're not. But the point is,
well, judges want to stay alive. Judges want to stay alive too.
Yeah.
Sorry, David. Tim was just interjecting that judges wanted to stay alive, but we didn't hear that.
Absolutely. I mean, It's a rigged game. I mean, Jefferson, who I admire and certainly haven't read everything he ever wrote, but, he alluded to the fact if you lose, we had in my opinion, a very well thought out structure. The executive, legislative, and judicial branches, those three parts of the stool. But he indicated if we ever lost the judicial side, we're sunk, because that's the ultimate authority, is, our God-given constitutionally secured rights. And as long as the Constitution was interpreted correctly, always and everywhere for everyone, because the idea was the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. So if I stole a can of peas from the store and I was a senator, or I stole a can of peas from the store and I was a janitor in a high school, the punishment would be the exact same, because it didn't matter what class we were or what kind of money we had. We were individuals under a system that treated everyone, quote unquote, equally. But that's a ruse now. So the whole system obviously is broken down, and it's very sad in a way, because, but again, I'll just repeat my point. The point is, once you lose the judges and they can be controlled with money, which most people can be controlled, then you have a system that isn't going to work properly.
That's why I like the analogy of money and energy, because when you say to people you can print money and that's how the banks lend it to them, they probably think, well, okay, they're just creating money on a computer, but you can't just create energy out of nothing. And
That's
I think they can see that disparity, where if somebody was doing that, you'd say, well, that's just not possible. Well, it isn't possible. That's the whole point, and that's how our system works, to allow them to do that, and the distortions that it creates. But I wanted to circle back a bit, because you mentioned at the top of the show that your letter was very popular when you first, well, obviously it's still popular, but it was most popular up until the point of 2011. And at that point, that was clearly the top of the gold market from my memory. And then obviously the market went into a correction and a consolidation for quite some time. But very recently, we've now seen the explosion in price that Austrian school economists and value investors have been expecting. And, certainly Tim has been calling for this for some time, like your good self. What does it mean to us that this is happening now? Are we at the end of the system? Are we close to the end of the system? And is there any way of telling?
Well, Paul, was you or Tim, or maybe both? I mean, you talked about the film I was in called The Four Horsemen film.
Yeah.
And that whole film revolves around the end of the Age of Empire.
Yeah.
And one of the main tenets in the movie is that this cycle repeats itself. And yes, we are at the end. There's little doubt. What we don't know is, what does the end look like? And we're pretty clear it will be a disarray. There will be pushback by some people, maybe by some nation states. I mean, when the illness came around, there was almost a universal acceptance of the jibby jabberoo, but there were a few that were inclined to say thanks, but no thanks, and most of them ended up with an early demise. So, but there are always resistance. I mean, a lot of my favorite movies revolve around the underdog and truth, or the ultimate truth being the highest form of human experience, is to fight for it. And Braveheart is probably one of my favorite movies. I mean, what price freedom? How accurate that movie is, I'm really not certain, but the idea is certainly very principled, that some people are willing. When he gives that speech on the horseback, to you could run, you can go back to your homes, you can nestle in your bed, but many days from now, will you think about coming back here for that one chance? Because to me, one of the best small updates I ever did was Missing the Silver Market. And it's a pretty long video. Most of them try to be short, but I think it's about 20 minutes. And it talks about Bernanke and what he's telling us. And then Ron Paul shows him a silver coin, and he kind of goes into shock. You can see his body language. It's a rather interesting video to watch. But I say in the middle of that video that the amount of gold or silver that you have, the amount of real money you have, really serves no purpose if we can't go where we want to go, say we want to say, live where we want to be, marry who we want to marry. In other words, if we don't have freedom, it doesn't matter how much real money we have, because we've lost everything. And that is the most important thing that we should strive to be. And that's why I've written, I won't say numerous, but probably 10 essays over the last 25 years that deal with real honest money and freedom, because they are linked. When we choose what money is and how to create commerce between ourselves, and we agree, and it's not harming anyone. In fact, it's beneficial for both sides. It's a paradox. It's a win-win. When we're in that kind of a system, everybody prospers. And when we're in a system where it's under the force of state control, then that's when we lose not only our humanity in a way, but our freedom, or our freedom of being, our freedom of purpose, or freedom of whatever. And that, of course, is more important than any amount of gold. I mean, you can be in a situation where you have so much real money that you're, King Midas of your community. But, how many cars or automobiles can you get, and what purpose do they serve? Whereas if you're not free, it serves absolutely no purpose in the long run. So that's the main mission, I would say, that I have, is to try to understand that they're linked, and that people need to understand what they're giving up. And, how to resist is very difficult for most people, because they're so worn out. I'm going to digress one more time and give it back to you guys. But one of the most depressing days I ever had was I was in London. I'd given a speech. I was done with the day. My friend Nick Williams there in the UK, great friend of mine over there. And we're taking the tube, as you guys call it. And we were going out, I think, to get a coffee or something. And it was rush hour for you guys, or what we call rush hour in the States. And all these Londoners were in the tube, holding on, standing up, sitting down. And I looked, and there was just this void almost everyone, like they were non-player characters, like their soul was sucked out of them. It actually, I can think about it now and still get upset. It's like, man, these people, they're just existing. There was just no joy, no happiness, no, and that's my interpretation, but I felt it. It wasn't like just looking at him. I actually felt like, my God, and it's similar here in the States. I mean, there's a lot of people that are just getting by, and really, I mean, it's surviving. I mean, that's not what we're here for.
In their defense, it's very difficult to get excited and happy when you're on the tube. So
yeah, I bet. Okay, yeah, and that is a special context. So thank you for that. So back to you guys.
Yeah, Tim, did you want to jump in?
No. I think David said it all.
Yeah, I would. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions about whether you think, from your research at the moment, given how far and how fast commodities have moved up, whether you still believe that there is more upside, or have the best of the gains been seen?
Sort of depends how we unravel. If we have much more acceleration in the printing press, they will go higher. And I think that's what we're in for. I mean, previously, I've believed, not knowing, that we would get to a point where the new system would be installed. They'll call it CBDCs for argument's sake. We don't know exactly the new system. It's leaning that direction, but just for argument's sake, we'll say that's what it is. And that will take place before we get to a hyperinflationary blow-off. But I'm starting to pull back on that a little bit, thinking that perhaps we're going to have to see a hyperinflationary blow-off before they install the new system. And maybe that is the plan. I don't know I know they want to maintain control. Well, to my thinking, and from what I've studied and read, to be able to install a new system after there's no trust in the currency at all is pretty difficult. But today's, computer age and digital ID and all of that, perhaps not. Perhaps they know it's actually easier. I don't believe that, but it doesn't make me right. So I do think we've got another round where we accelerate to the point where everyone just kind of gives up and accepts the new system, because now this currency is depreciating at such a rapid rate that give me something I can believe in.
Is that the crack up boom?
The crack up boom. That's where we're going to be.
Right. And are we close to that, do you think? Is there any way of telling?
Oh, we are. I mean, how close? That's debatable. Some of my peer groups say we've got 10 more years. I think we've got about a year and a half or two. But I've been wrong before. One thing about me is I've been right, but I've also been early. and I've lost perhaps some credibility. I mean, I don't sit here and measure myself against what others think. I mean, some opinions I value, but most I don't, because I'm my worst critic. I mean, I value me on my own principles and whether I'm achieving them or not, or what I could do better. I mean, I'm never satisfied with I've helped enough, but that doesn't stop me from getting up the next day, sitting down here and doing my best.
So if we gave you godlike powers right now
Well, you're assuming David doesn't have godlike powers already, Paul.
Okay, so if we gave you more godlike powers, Zeus, like god of gods powers, to change the system, to make it better. And it's always a difficult question to ask when you're trying to fix a system that we've got right now that's broken. But if you could start again, which I think is a fairer question to ask, how should it work?
Yeah, great question. This is a theoretical answer, but from people that I've read and learned from, my betters, you might say, the only way to really resolve a problem is first to clearly state and understand the problem. So there is a Twilight Zone movie. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling was, in my estimation, a very brilliant screenwriter. And there was one of his Twilight Zone films, and at the end of the film, what happened was everybody on the planet had to tell the truth for one day. And that would change things. But coming back, I'd say we would need someone, a real statesman, a real leader, to state the problem clearly for the world at large. Look, we're on a fake system. We're getting something for nothing. The bankers are in charge. They've done it for years, and it's just plain wrong. And from now on, we're going to install this system where it's based on our energies. And, it's an energy-based system. We don't have to transact with tokens anymore or whatever. Who knows? But the point I'm making is you have to clearly state the problem where everyone understands it, or nearly.
Was the last person to try that JFK?
Exactly. And you know what happened. But it doesn't mean, it's sort of like Braveheart. I mean, William Wallace, was there I don't want to be morbid here, and I don't know how you're going to interpret this, but I mean, in a way, I would idolize him in a way, because I don't like idolizing anyone, but a man of principle that will go to the end. Again, William Wallace, what price freedom? I mean, Kennedy said it. And, so many things that were intertwining there, because he wanted to go on the Treasury printing the currency, which he did. I have some examples. It actually did happen. And of course, when Johnson installed it, the first thing that he took control back to the banks was he signed in an executive order to make the executive order, I think it's 11110, something like that. I don't know the exact number, going back to the Federal Reserve System from the U.S. Treasury printing the currency. That was step one. So that was one of many things that Kenny was putting into the national consciousness to make our country basically what it started as, a government of the people, for the people, by the people, not by the bankers, for the bankers, and with the bankers. But it didn't last very long.
And I think the way I would look at this is in a sort of Wallace-esque way, which is, it comes under a fairly simple premise, which is sometimes you just have to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, whatever the consequences are.
Well, I think that's sort of our meaning individually. I don't know. I can't speak for others, but, how far are you willing to go? I mean, when I really got on this path, it was kind of a turning point. It's kind of what ended my aircraft career. I don't want to go into the details, but one of my mentors at the time said, well, what price freedom? You got a choice. You can go back in and, be a good boy and, yes, sir, 3 bags full, or you can take another track. It's up to you. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask you the question: what price freedom?
Well, that's surely the mission of life, isn't it? For people to work out what the purpose is and how they want to do it. Let people find out for themselves.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, I guess you could say I mentor some people, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that word. But really, if you're good-hearted, if you're really connected or really integrated, head, heart, and hands, I mean, you're a full being, what a human is meant to be. you want the best for everyone else. If you look, the people that work for me are as good as I am or better. And that's what I want. I don't want some, oh, yes, David. Oh, yes, David. I don't want that at all. Now, I don't like real hard confrontation, like you're an idiot. I don't like to be called names, although I can do it, accept it. But people that say, wait a minute, what about this? Or do you think about it this way? Or I came up with a better way or whatever. That's how you progress. I mean, you don't want to be so full of yourself, there's no room for more information. And some of my ilk, I see that. I won't name names, but there's a few out there that get interviewed as often as I do that seem to know everything. Man, that's the wrong attitude in my book.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, you mentioned your own documentary, which I haven't had an opportunity to watch. What would people get from? What would you expect them to get from this? What's the message from that documentary?
Well, as I just said a moment ago, in order to, get a clear introduction to how to solve the problem, you've got to make the problem very clear to everyone. So, half of the movie is probably about the monetary system and why it's a problem and what's wrong with it. But after that's established, we go into, okay, well, how do we fix it? And a lot of it has to do with energy, different energy sources, independence, free thinking, community, being of service to others, working from your authentic self, try to not hide behind the victim card. A lot of what we discussed already, because these are really important questions for everyone. I mean, you can be a different person in a day if you have, I'll call it a jolt of enlightenment. What does that mean, David? What it means is you got through the fog of truth. You got through the paradigm. You broke the matrix is probably a good way to put it, because most people at least have watched the Matrix and have some inkling of what it's really all about. And they understand that you're kind of programmed, and you realize, no, I actually can freely think, and I can make decisions that might be tough ones, hard choices. Tell the boss to shove it and rely that I can find a better job or start a business or rely on my savings for the next 2 months, and that's all I've got, but I'll find a way and I'll be more free to do what I want rather than what I hate doing. I hate, whatever. So that's the idea of the film, is to give people the broader picture of just how really fascinating the human experience is, and to live it fully, because living it for someone else to make a banker richer is not our purpose here. It's far, far superior to that.
I think you make a really good point that it's, I've never really understood how some people just want to get ahead, but want to see other people fail. It doesn't work. It doesn't, I don't see how it improves your life if somebody else's life is worse. If everybody, I know it might sound kind of, perhaps unrealistic, but it just seems to me if everyone is doing well, that can only be good for you. It helps everybody. And
I think the problem is that, unfortunately, evolution favors a small percentage of psychopaths within the community to cover every eventuality.
They get found out eventually, though, don't they? It just takes a long time. That's the problem. They're very good at hiding it.
Yeah, I'll have to quote Martin Luther King. I forget the question that was asked, but he said, "The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I like to think that's true.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a
well, the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceeding fine.
Yeah, well said. Yes.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So, David, was there anything on that list that you've got there that we didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
I think we've covered it generally. The last set of notes is my bottom line. This isn't really about gold and silver, or even digital currencies. It's about the fundamental question: who controls the money, controls the society. And that more people that understand that, the more we'll begin to take that control back. I think that's probably not as good an ending as those two quotes, but I really think that we need to be more authentic. I'll leave you with this corny, but it seems to resonate at some of my interviews. So when I'm out and about, and I'm not and I'm at the barista. I don't do many coffee shops, but I do occasionally, especially if I'm traveling. If I'm in an airport, I'll almost always stop and get one because I've got an hour or two or three or four. And when I am getting presented a coffee from the barista or the checkout girl, whatever, I always try to be grounded in my heart and thank them as a human being. Look at them as valuable as me. And that practice is something I think that if we just took those extra few moments to respond to people from the heart, that maybe that little extra connection to another human might actually permeate and put us in a better place. Because it's not about what we have, it's about what we have. It's not what we have external to ourselves, how much gold, what our house is, what our car looks like, we got a trophy wife or not. It has to do with how much we can give back. And just by being heartfelt and saying, hey, I appreciate you here, appreciate you handing me that coffee, appreciate you just being here. That is what it's all about. And I think that we can get there. It just takes practice.
I think in this age of AI and technology that we've been drawn more and more towards, for good and for bad, but I think for bad from a human perspective, actually connecting with people is a very good point. You know, spending more time going to real events, meeting real people, and actually, realizing that every day is some form of interaction. You can either just be interacting on a screen, but you're missing the wider world out there. And to try and turn the machine off at some point, and I find it really difficult for children these days. I think it must be so hard with all the distractions. I know in some ways life might have been harder when we were younger from an economic perspective. It was definitely easier to be a child and to think for yourself, because this paradox of having so much information and stimulus all the time, not being able to be bored to think of new things and new ways and form your own opinions. We've kind of missed that whole period, or we came into it later in our lives when perhaps ideas were formed. But for the kids of today, I'm sure they'll survive it one way or the other. Maybe it'll be seen as a strength, but I can't see it at the moment. It's just
Neil Postman wrote a book, and I think the title was "Amusing Ourselves to Death."
Wow, that's a very good title. Yeah, that definitely resonates. So David, what we normally do when we finish off our pod is we share what we call media picks, which I've just realized that I should have emailed this to you or mentioned it at the top of the show, but I haven't. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit by saying that we like to share something in terms of a book or a film or it could be anything really. It could be a podcast. It could be a link to something. We're definitely going to link all of your website and clearly the documentary that you've made. That will be in the show notes anyway. But as a kind of way of rounding off the show, we like to just share things that we found that are either very good and we recommend people watch or consume them, or very bad and they should definitely avoid them at all costs. So perhaps whilst you're having a little think, we'll turn to Tim and see what he's got for us.
Yeah, so my pick, and it'll be again a golden oldie for many people. I'm sure many of our listeners will have seen it probably more than once. I was watching it again yesterday for political reasons, which I'm sure will become entirely clear. It's Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. It's actually quite a short film. It's from 1964, I think. Stanley Kubrick wrote and directed it, and Peter Sellers plays about half the cast. It's a Peter Sellers fest, but basically about an American general who goes a little bit loopy and basically starts World War III. And I've seen it a few times, and I was watching it yesterday, it wasn't at all funny for the first time, because it now appears like basically some kind of documentary, it's a kind of visionary prophecy of how the world may end, which is a combination of bang and whimper, but mostly bang. So I suspect most people already have seen it, but for people who haven't, Dr. Strangelove is a satirical masterpiece, and it's a sign of how things can go very badly wrong because of the nature of institutionalized power.
Okay. I've not seen it, actually, believe it or not, although I've heard the title.
Paul, wash your mouth out with soap and water.
I'll make sure that
I can't believe this. I mean, Paul is himself the director of film, and he's not seen Dr. Strangelove. I'm sorry. I'm being violently ill now into a bucket.
I promise I'll correct it by the weekend.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
That's told me, isn't it? Yeah. David, what would you recommend?
I would recommend Idiocracy.
It contains electrolytes.
It's a comedy, purportedly, but
I think your other film was also a Mike Judge film, because I think you were also channeling Office Space about the guys who are diddling tiny fractions of a penny on each dollar transaction, because Office Space is fantastically funny too.
Yeah, but it's really sad. I mean, society is devolving, not evolving. And I believe it's deliberate. I think that the political class and the money masters combined have programmed the system to their benefit, not ours. And it's very, very sad. But Idiocracy takes it to an extreme. And as humorous as it is at times, I think there's a definite message there.
Yeah, they say in comedy there's always an element of truth. And that's, great. We'll definitely check that out. Mine is going to be a guy that I've found on YouTube, and his name is Richard Murphy. I don't know if you've seen him. He does a series of very short videos about economic subjects where he just tackles something and then just kind of speaks for 15, 20 minutes on it. And I found them really interesting because he asks very difficult questions and then explains the answer to them. That, for example, one that he's mentioned is, why are all countries in debt? Which we know all countries are in debt, but why? And he's got 1.1 million views for that particular video. So I think that's it suggests that it's actually quite a lot more popular than you'd expect for a video of that kind. But you're usually recommending something on Veritasium, which I think is absolutely a fantastic YouTube channel. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but just about everything on that channel is fantastic. But Richard Murphy, I'm new to him, and I find him quite interesting. So, David, just leaves us to say, if you're ever coming to London, please definitely let us know, because
we'll pay for a cab so you don't have to use the tube.
Exactly.
And fair enough.
We'd take you for lunch somewhere, and it'd be really nice to see you. Let us know where people can find more information about you and your services.
Yeah, the best way is just the landing page, themorganreport.com. And from there, there's, you can branch out anywhere. It's just 3 steps. It's a 3-step process. Step 1 is the free report. Step 2 is the 2 films. The one I made, the Silver Sunrise documentary, and also the 4 Horsemen documentary. And then there's icons for our X channel, our YouTube channel, our Facebook presence, which is practically nothing. And LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn presence. So if you're interested in any of those social media channels, there's direct links to those. And step 3 is for people that want to get involved behind a paywall. If they're interested in learning how to build and preserve wealth, primarily through the equity side of the resource sector, then you can explore that as well.
Brilliant. The 4 Horsemen documentary, I remember being completely engrossed by it. And the one thing that I also do remember, funnily enough, from the whole thing, forgive me, it was 14 years ago, was that the indication of the age of this kind of system was that there is a lot of, or the rise of the celebrity chef.
Right.
being an indicator. And I thought that is so fascinating because, of course, there's nothing but that on the TV at the moment. And there was a lot of it back in 2012. But it also goes back to your point of what you were saying. These things can last for much longer than you expect. But when you write history back and you say the difference between 10, 15, 20 years compared to a massive upheaval in the financial markets, it's the ending can last 10, 20, 30 years, but the actual event is becoming more and more inevitable. And trying to predict that last point doesn't mean that the thinking was wrong. It's just you never know exactly how long these systems are going to last.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah. Probably the main critique that I get the most often is just that, well, you've been saying this for years. I remember when I started on the speaking circuit, and one of the brokers, pretty high-powered dude, didn't have anything against him, but he got a little angry on after the 2-day event, we're all having, cocktails or whatever. He said, well, you guys have been saying that forever. It never happens. And it's like, well, you're right, but it's happening. And that's the old, I don't know, is it Hemingway? How did you go broke? Well, very slowly, then all of a sudden. And that's what happens when the acceleration, if we go into the crack up boom that we discussed and the currency, and it's not that they have to print more. It's a psychological change. It's that I'm going to the store and bread just went up twice the last 2 times I went to the store, and I go once a week. I'm getting rid of this shit. I'm buying all I've got left in the bank, I'm buying jars of peanut butter and tuna fish because it stores well, because this money's becoming so invaluable to me. I'm not going to, it's the rush to get something. It's really I would say get something for nothing because it's your labor that you took to get that piece of paper, but it's like it's running out of value. Its true value is being seen for everyone. Everyone sees the emperor for what it's worth. Wait a minute, this stuff really isn't worth anything. I better get something for it while I still can. Once that psychology holds, that's it. Game over.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to end the podcast. David, once again, thank you so much. We look forward to having you back. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you. Same here. And I would make the request that you both watch the documentary, and maybe come up with some questions on it. And I would do a conversation and say, well, you're in the documentary. What would you do? What would you propose? Did I miss something that maybe there's different in the UK that we didn't get in the film? Something like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I'd love to do that. Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks again, David.
You're most welcome.
We'll be in contact.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks, everybody. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research or contact a professional advisor.